I think that there's times when the Lord's like, I'm going to give you something you never saw coming. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is my wife, Misti, and this is our CCM Spotlight. Just one of those kids that grew up around church and was going to a Bible study one day with some guys that were trying to disciple new believers. And they just asked a question, does anybody know any Jesus music? And you have to go back to it was like 1988. And there was just no Christian radio that played any kind of music that I ever wanted to listen to. And so there was no place to go to learn what we considered to be hip Christian music, And then they said, does anybody own a guitar? And I literally was the guy that owned a guitar. And I started writing songs about what we were studying in the Bible just as a group of college guys. And those guys put together a little package and they sent it off to these guys in Memphis, Tennessee at Ardent Recording Studio, which is kind of a famous recording studio in Memphis. We made some demos and they shopped them. I had a record deal on Sparrow Records that released in 1990. And then that just kind of came and went, didn't really sell any records, and ended up forming a band with a friend of mine that I went to high school with. It was like magical. It's like, oh, that's what was missing. So we cut a bunch of demos, which turned out to be most of our first Big Tent Revival record, called Steve Wiggins, and then we came up with the name and Big Tent Revival. It's a weird marketing decision in the sense that I noticed from my solo record that most Christian record bookstores would shelve albums alphabetically. So Jimmy Abeg or Audio Adrenaline, 2 A's, would be at the top,
right,
and W would be at your feet. And I thought, nobody's ever going to see my record because it's not at eye level. And as I was thinking about that, I was like, well, you know what we could do? We could drop Steve Wiggins out of it, and it could put us back up to, or any list, when things are listed alphabetically, we'll at least be at the front of that list. And it was kind of a stupid little marketing thing, but I think maybe in some ways it worked, and it helped.
We met in December of 91.
Where?
We met at a Bible study. He already was working with Sparrow Records on his first record. I think he had already kind of completed that. A mutual friend of ours said, hey, you guys need to get together and work. Y'all need to write together. I was a budding musician at the time, and so was he. And I kind of had forgotten that I'd given him my number. So here he calls me 6 months later.
Now you probably wish you hadn't.
I don't think so. It was the best decision of my life. So he called me up about 6 months later and said, hey, this is Steve Wiggins. And then he had to remind me who he was. And we hit the road running. We actually did start by, hanging out together and writing music, and which of course morphed into dating. And then eventually 2 years later, we dated for about 2.5 years, got married, and on we went. So I've been at it from the very beginning with Steve. So.
Misti was singing in a band, and they were all going to the University of Memphis. And
yeah, I was in college.
So they had a recording engineering department where they were teaching, music production and stuff. So her band was recording for somebody's student project. It's the best way to get a free album in the world.
That's right.
And
exactly right.
So they were in there, and I was supposed to meet up with them, and somebody was going to take me there. And so they were like in the downtown area, and they were going to catch me in Midtown. And we were going to go to East Memphis, where University of Memphis is. And in the time between them leaving where they were and picking me up, I had written this song because I was already like, I'm in love with this girl. I didn't know how she felt about me necessarily, but every relationship you have before you get married ends in a breakup. That's just the way it works. And so it's like, I don't want this to go that way. We were both fairly new Christians, maybe a couple
believers.
of years into it.
Very young.
And so it's kind of like, can I trust the Lord with this relationship? And so I sat and I said, well, I can go one of two ways, go the way I've always gone, or go the way that the Lord wants me to go, and with this relationship. And so I wrote a song about two couples, one of them, both on the same starting line, and one of them continues in the Lord, and the other one never seeks the Lord, just goes off what the world says is successful. And I wrote this song. And I got in the car with this guy, and I'd just written it, and I had a scrap of paper in my hand with lyrics on it.
You didn't even put it on your little tape recorder.
Oh, none of those things.
Yeah.
And I got in the car, and I said, don't play the radio. because I'll lose it. I got a song, I'll lose it if you play and I'd lost a lot of songs. Can you imagine how many of you lost it? Maybe could have been something. But I never forget, I walked into that studio at the University of Memphis and I said, do you have tape ready to roll? And the guy goes, yeah. And I said, would you just record? I've got to get this before I forget it. And I played this song, Two Sets of Joneses. Yeah. And I'll just never forget, I finished the song and I looked up and everybody was just looking at me like a calf looking at a new gate. Like, what do we do with? I was like, oh, this must be really bad. And they were like, dude, that is incredible. You wrote that song?
We were absolutely floored.
And I think that there's times in life when the Lord, you can't usher him in, you can't conjure him. He's not our genie in heaven. But I think that there's times when the Lord's like, I'm going to give you something you never saw coming. Mm-hmm. And you got to like protect it. You have to like curate it and make sure that it's, and that's really the story of our relationship to some. We've been both sets of Joneses at certain points. The ones who were doing it all right, and then we've been the ones that it's like we're just acting, probably mostly me, that sort of the knuckleheaded side of it. But that's just one of those things where it's a life changer.
Yeah.
And she sang with me on that, and all of the Big Tent Revival albums, she sang all the. If you hear a girl, it's her.
Yes.
Well, what's interesting is when I wrote it, I was signed still to Sparrow Records. And so I remember sitting in a writer's room right when they opened in Brentwood, what was Sparrow Records building. Mm-hmm. I remember playing it for Brown Bannister in that room. Michael Card was there that day. He was on Sparrow, I think, at that time. And Michael invited me over to his house to see his guitars and stuff, which was unbelievably gracious. And I played it for him, too. The guys at Sparrow were kind of like, it's okay. It's not the greatest thing we've ever heard. And so I didn't really know how to feel about it. And the guys at Ardent Records knew that it was probably the best song that I had, but maybe not necessarily the best song. And what's interesting is that song has got legs. It's had legs. Its whole, still, if you go to a marriage conference, they might play the video to Two Sets of Joneses because it's like, this is exactly what we're preaching about. And I think sometimes it comes down to the fact that, the Lord gives you something, the value of it, and people around you may not know the value of it. They may never appreciate it, but if you believe in it, well, then don't stop pushing it until it becomes what it is that you know that it needs to be. And that's a level of grit and persistence that a lot of artists, maybe they don't have, or they don't have the luxury of having. But I'm kind of like, I got nothing to lose, and I believe in this song.
I think the production on it is timeless, and the content obviously is super relevant to any young couple, any couple of any age, young or old.
If you looked at the CCM radio charts prior to the mid-'90s, you'd have Wayne Watson. They were all solo artists, Twyla Paris, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Margaret Becker, all these solo artists. The bands would be on some fringe label, or a fringe version of even a major label. They weren't getting a lot of attention. And when Jesus Freak released, you can't play Jesus Freak and now next up Twyla Paris. You know what I'm saying? You can't play that and then now next up, this person. And I think a lot of programmers were sort of like, gosh, this Jesus Freak thing is undeniable. Everybody wants to hear it. And there just happened to be a few bands around. We were one of them. And it's kind of like, well, this sounds really great next to Jesus, going into it or going out of it or whatever. And I think that Jesus Freak record alone was not only a big success for DC Talk, but I think it really, helped open the doors for a whole season, about a decade worth of Christian bands. Missy, how many concerts did I do before we released Two Sets of Joneses a month? What do you think?
Oh.
Let's say a quarter. Every 3 months, how many concerts was I doing?
Oh, just a few here and there. And then, and we actually just had our first son. And a couple months later, I was working full time. And when my maternity leave was up, Steve was the in-house babysitter. So he was only gone a little bit here and there. When Two Sets of Joneses hit, It was like a full-on marathon for 7 years.
We're doing at least 3 or 4 shows a week for
Yeah.
like the next 7 years.
Yeah, they earned the title through CCM as the hardest working band in CCM. And they were gone nonstop. It was awesome. It was exhausting.
When my oldest son, who's now 30,
Mm-hmm.
when he went to kindergarten, I realized I can't put my family on a tour bus anymore, which means I am going to be gone 3 or 4 days a week forever.
This is previous to the big
Yeah.
homeschool era.
Yeah, and because I'm going to be gone half my marriage, half my kids' lives. It was
And had
already
been.
affecting our relationship. Then you started to see giants like oaks of the Christian music world falling, right? And I look and say, who are we compared to the sales or the impact or the force that these people are making? And it's like it was devastating to be gone that much from the people that are closest to you. And the hardest thing I ever had to do was to walk into a management meeting and say, I can't do it anymore. That was the hardest thing I had to do. And then the question is, well, what are we going to do now? And that took me to a very difficult and yet a real blessed season of my life, where it's like, okay, well, if you're not a lead singer of a band and a songwriter, what are you? And I had to realize that it's possible to be unemployed, but it's impossible to be uncalled.
Thanks for watching our CCM Spotlight.
If you want to find out more information about what we're up to, groundworksministries.com.